This is a movie I remember seeing in the theater. So I obviously chose this movie for us to talk about here.
Yeah, why are we talking about this movie?
Well, it was 20 years ago this month of September that I first saw this movie. It hit the theaters on September 8th, 2000. And I remember that would have been probably right the first week of school. And I turned to all my friends like, let's go see this movie. It looks really good. And they're like, what's it called? Nurse Betty. And like, every single one of them like, I got other things to do this weekend. So I went up
Not the best title.
I went up seeing it on my own. And I was like, I love it. It's great. It's one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. It is one of my favorite movies, without a doubt. It's one of my favorite movies I've ever seen. So it's one of those personal things I have a definite connection to. But I thought 20th anniversary, it's a movie that I imagine is completely forgotten about. The company that even made it no longer exists.
Yeah.
USA Films, yes, the cable channel that I don't even know if the cable channel exists anymore. Was
Yeah, I
released.
think it does. Well, I don't know. Does it?
I have no idea.
Nobody has cable anymore.
So it probably does, and nobody's watching it.
Yeah, I think it does.
But so they were making movies at that time. That didn't last. I mean, it's just completely forgotten about. It managed to win the Cannes Best Screenplay Award.
Yeah.
It won the Golden Globe for Best Actress in a Musical or Comedy, which was actually hilarious because when Renee Zellweger won, she even must have forgotten that she was nominated because she wasn't there. She was going to the bathroom when they announced that she had won.
The winner is Renee Zellweger. Renee? Where is she? She's under the table? Renee is drunk, ladies and gentlemen. Where is she? What's happened? She disappeared. She's in the bathroom. Okay.
So it's like this movie that I loved and nobody paid attention to. But whenever I showed it to people, because I forced all my friends to watch it, they all were just laughing and having a great time. They think it was just a fantastic movie. So that's why we're talking about it.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen this film in a very long time. I think
You're one of the friends that I forced to watch it.
Yeah, well, that's right. Yeah, and so seeing it again was pretty refreshing. I mean, we talk about whether or not something is a real movie a lot here because, I mean, we're living in times where movies are more products than they are movies.
You could never get this made today. No one's greenlighting this movie.
No.
I don't know how it got made when it did get made.
This is very much a screenwriter's movie.
Yes.
You know, I think. When I watch this movie, I can see the screenwriter sitting behind the computer, typing, this dialogue, just having a blast, really. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I think of when I watch this, is just the quality of the writing.
I've got a surprise for tonight. We're going to the Starlight in Style.
Oh, Betty.
Okay, I'll give you a hint. You squint your eyes, and it looks just like a Jaguar.
Well, I think, it's a fantastic script. I mean,
Yeah.
it's blending a lot of different things. There's genuine, heartfelt emotion. There's real clever comedy, great dialogue.
Go to your room now.
Precious, ain't they?
A very intricate plot. There's suspense. I mean, it's got a ton of different emotions that it can convey.
It's a very dark comedy. Yeah.
Yes, very much. It's the black comedy. It's just fantastic in that regard. But it's also just extremely well made. Neil LaBute, who made the film, I wouldn't say he was a big director, but he was certainly becoming known among critics. He had made In the Company of Men was with Aaron Eckhart, who gets a little small role in this film. Rather very comical role in this film, with the greatest haircut I think I've seen in a movie. It's smart. There's just really good direction in this film, and just something as simple. Okay, so the story's Betty Sizemore is a Kansas housewife in a total dead end marriage. Works at the local diner. watches this TV soap opera, daytime soap opera called A Reason to Love, with Greg Kinnear playing playing George McCord,
Yep.
who is then playing the character of Dr. David Ravel. I was going to say Dr. Nick Riviera, because I'm a Simpsons fan, but Dr. David Ravel. And she's using this as an escape, right, for her very miserable life. But you just have great details coming up so quick and so fast. Her husband, Dell, by Aaron Eckhart, is cheating on her, and just the used car salesman, and it's just like that little detail when you pan across and he's having the affair with the woman in the office, and you see the scratch marks on the wall from where they've been
terrible kind of wood paneling.
It's like
I
it's
have
just
behind me
laughable.
right here.
Yeah, it's just you're just like, where would you think of having the detail of having like the scratch marks from where her foot has been rubbing up against it while they're having these extramarital encounters? And
Yeah.
it's just hilarious, these little details that they throw in
The
there.
production design is pretty impressive in that bit.
If you ask me, everything's. I mean, the cinematography, everything is just throughout the whole movie. It's just fantastic. The score is fantastic.
It's a very quintessential comedic orchestral score,
Right.
with a memorable theme.
Yeah. But it's heartfelt. I mean, that's the thing what's so fascinating in this movie is that it's heartfelt. So when you see her go home after, we get this it's economical filmmaking. You see very clearly who she is. You learn the plight of her. You attach yourself to her situation. You see that she's a good person. She's got a friend. She's not
forgiving.
Dumb.
When
She's
they
not
can't,
dumb.
go
She's
out
not
together.
a patsy. It's not condescending to her like she's some stupid moron.
No.
And you see that he just is a jerk who eats her cupcake, which all of her coworkers gave to her, and you see her repairing it, and just those little
She has
details.
that little moment where she's an optimist, right? I
Right.
mean, despite her circumstances, she may be shutting out the more painful details, but it doesn't look down on her, as you said. It doesn't treat her as a dummy, and this is someone who's a small backwoods type Kansas person, or however you want to characterize her. She's heartfelt, she's earnest, and those character details are established very well, very early.
Yeah, and part of that's because of just the success of Renee Zellweger's performance. I mean, it's the way she plays that scene where they surprise her with her birthday money to go start taking her nursing classes, right? And they have the cardboard cutout. It's funny, and you can tell she plays it as kind of embarrassed. Like she gets like, this is a little embarrassing, but she plays along with it, right? And so you really just root for her in this wonderful way. And then the movie takes this entire right turn, or left turn, I guess. I don't know which one's the unexpected turn. But it takes this weird, wild turn where all of a sudden what's kind of set up as a very typical down on your luck kind of, but golly gosh, gee whiz, she's going to make it kind of story, like a Mary Tyler Moore movie. All of a sudden, Morgan Freeman and Chris Rock show up as a pair of assassins.
The two most unexpected hitmen you could probably imagine.
Who are tied in because Dell, her husband, has got some drugs in one of his used cars that he is trying to sell, and they frickin' scalped him.
Well,
And
Chris Rock
bloody
does.
detail. And argue about it. That's the best part.
I had to shoot him, Wesley. It was the only decent thing to do. After you scalped him.
I just know that there's something really special. There's something really special out there for me.
Very unprofessional, Wesley.
And there's like great lines. I mean, this where they're debating us afterwards. They're at the parking lot after they've killed him.
You only got one look. You give me this look. I thought you were done, so I offed him.
Well, I wasn't done. I was just tired of hearing him whine. And you didn't off anybody, buddy. You scalped him. Jesus, I almost puked. Did I tell you that?
Then why'd you tell me the fucking Indian story?
The hell does that mean, Wesley? If I told you a Ty Cobb story, would you have taken a baseball bat and beaten him to death?
It's just like
But it
hilarious.
just comes out of nowhere too, and it still manages to be comedic, even though it's very horrifying.
Well,
and boring.
just Chris Rock's own reaction as he scalps him. he's holding the scalp in his hand and he's screaming at what he's done. It's just.
But
I know this sounds like we're going off the rails here, people. But if you have seen the movie, you would understand exactly why it's so funny.
It works. It shouldn't work, but it does.
But I think that's why it works, because it isn't playing anything safe. I mean, it goes in on its premise.
It's committed.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely committed. But Chris Rock is definitely there for the comedic relief, and he's constantly eating throughout this movie.
How the hell can you eat at a time like this? I get nauseous just watching you.
Well, I can eat because I know we didn't kidnap no woman. I can eat because I know ain't nobody looking for us. And I can eat because I'm fucking hungry.
What they don't know as they kill Aaron Eckhart is that in the back room, Betty is at home because her birthday plans had fallen apart. She's watching an episode of A Reason to Love and looks out, sees this horribly traumatic experience, and then has like a mental snap where she becomes delusional and thinks that she's actually in the soap opera, that those characters are real characters.
Which isn't entirely clear at first. At least, and maybe it's just my lack of picking up on details, but at first it seems like she doesn't really care what's happening to her husband. Like, she's so engrossed in the TV show that she's shutting everything out. But then you realize, that she's had this mental break and she's living in this sort of alternate reality because of the trauma of what she's seen. And that's pretty clear in the scene with the police afterwards, right?
Well, bye, Roy. Nice to see you, Sheriff. Thanks for stopping by.
She just kind of leaves. She's like, oh, okay,
Right.
bye, I'm out of here.
When they bring in the psychologist, the police bring in the psychologist, and they just explain, well, she's obviously had such a traumatic experience, she's created a different thing to protect her from the trauma.
Yeah.
But nobody really quite knows exactly what's going on, and then she just goes on the road to find her love, Dr. David Ravel. And thus begins a kind of road movie
Kind
of
of a road
sorts.
movie, yeah, exactly.
Where she goes, she meets different people along the way, and comes to Kansas, comes to the Grand Canyon, and you have just these different events that she meets, and you then have the characters of Wesley and Charlie, the two hitmen, having to follow behind them, or follow her to be able to get it.
Charlie's arc is very interesting in this movie, and that's one thing I love about the script is you definitely have arcs for the characters, but they're unexpected, but they're still convincing. I mean, they don't seem to be forced, and they don't seem to. I mean, it's a fairly outlandish movie, just conceptually, right? And
Right, I don't know that psychologically this is actually how mental breaks happen.
yeah,
but who cares?
exactly. You probably don't want to run it through an actual clinical psychologist, but it works for the film, and this film really has a perfect tone that's defined right from the opening. And you understand that this is a black comedy, punctuated by violence. It's kind of this heightened reality. So the character arcs that take place therein really kind of match that tone, where they may seem outlandish, but they're still convincing, and they're unexpected, and they keep you entertained and keep you interested. But Charlie in particular, how he develops his own obsession with Betty.
Yeah, it's a great parallel
interesting.
because she's obviously one of the things this film's getting at is the kind of the illusion of our dream, right? And was the tagline, which is on the poster. And because I'm such a big fan of this movie, I actually have the one sheet. We'll cut to a picture of me awkwardly posing next to it in the hallway of my basement. But yeah, there's just this, because the theme, the tagline was, she's chasing a dream, they're chasing her. And the film's really ultimately about how we create dreams for ourselves and then needing to really come back to a realistic understanding of who we are and accomplishing a realistic dream. That's really what the film winds up being about. Charlie develops his own fantasy Betty that he thinks she is.
You don't look all that comfortable here, little baby. But you don't like being the center of attention, do you? You're like me.
You smoking?
Huh?
What's wrong with you?
What the fuck, Wesley? That's a shitty thing to do.
And he ignores some information because it doesn't fit what he's conceiving of.
It's an idealized
Right,
version,
he's got an idea of who she must be, right? And it's just fascinated with who she might be, right?
How'd they describe her?
You know, blonde, thin, whatever.
Slow down. Blonde, thin, yeah. Did they say anything about style? Did they mention grace? Huh? Huh?
And Betty has her own idealized Dr. David Ravel. And eventually, as the film progresses, she gets to LA and has a rather comical experience with another, again, very bloody scene where she saves a man's life.
Yes.
And,
Oh, I think he has the thingy. What does he have? The air in the hole. He has too much air around the heart and the lungs, so I have to relieve the pressure so he can breathe. What do we do? Okay, here we go. What are you doing? You're gonna hurt him. No, I have to do this or he'll die. It's okay. I've seen it done once. Here we go. Ready? See? Was it so bad?
The pneumothorax, yeah.
I just love that scene where she applies for the job with the other nurse. And she's made up her, you could say, like, those little details, like you talked about the costume design, how she took her waitress uniform and retrofitted it into a nurse's uniform.
Which is very much a traditional nurse's uniform, right? Whereas all nurses today just wear scrubs, and in the movie we see that too, but it makes her character stand out just visually from that standpoint, but it's a neat twist on, it connects to her past in an unexpected way.
Yeah.
But Dr. Ravel is the finest surgeon on the staff. You must know him. He's really handsome, and he's gentle and considerate. He's being sued for sexual assault.
What?
Well, he didn't do it. He was set up.
Well, I certainly would have heard about that.
Of course, he's only here twice a week. He's also on staff over at Loma Vista.
I don't think I know that hospital.
Oh, it's the one in the really pretty area with the palm trees out front and the mountains in the back.
You've just described all of Southern California.
So she gets there, and then she's looking around. She makes a friend, Rosa, and then everybody starts to figure out, like, whoa, this woman's crazy. Like, she learns that Betty actually is thinking that this fake doctor is actually a real doctor.
Yeah.
And then tries to set her up with an embarrassing kind of falling flat on your face thing at this little charity event where she actually meets George McCord, who is mistaking her for this super method actress. And then again idealizes her.
It's a brilliant scene.
Yeah, he idealizes her as this actress that is trying with great ambition and great dedication to land a part on the show.
The day I left you, I just drove and drove. I drove all day and all that night. I just kept driving. I stopped at this old country church, and the pastor let me in, and I sat.
In the very first pew where we would have sat on our wedding day. I can't believe I remembered that.
And everyone's just misunderstanding what's going on around them all the time. And that is a great scene. And I think it's great, getting back to the direction, Neil LaBute's direction comedically is really smart because he sets up, okay, it's going to be Betty going to fall flat on her face. It becomes this entirely other scene. We just follow that, and then he cuts back at the very end to the friend to have the payoff to the fact that it's like...
She's frustrated.
Yeah, it's like,
she can't believe that.
Yeah, you get this great laugh out of that cut, but it's because he plays out the other scene long enough so that you forget that there was even a setup to why they met in the first place. Then he brings you back into why they met, and it's just hilarious.
But but even as the audience, you're kind of confused as to what's happening and how it's playing out, and then you ultimately realize that, oh, they're buying into this as a performance. So it keeps the audience interested and on edge too, in terms of, okay, what's going to happen? How is this going to be interpreted? Again, very, very unexpected, sort of delivery, and just the events are unexpected, and that's what makes the script, I think, so effective.
Right. Well, and I think it's a film that has not only a great script in terms of just concept, but it's also got great themes and great character relationships. The dialogue doesn't feel forced. The movie that made me think of this as being akin to would be Juno, which was trying so hard. If you ask me, in its script, it's trying so hard to be clever. This thing is just clever. It's not trying. It just is.
It's because the concept is clever.
Right.
If you start with a clever concept and your characters and the dialogue is operating within that that concept, you're going to be clever by default in a way. It's a weird thing. It's like, okay, the conceptualization of the story has to hold together. And once you define your characters, in a way, they kind of write themselves, or that's the way it should feel in a really good screenplay. And that definitely works here.
Yeah, no, it's. I think the film just works perfectly, almost like a miracle, because it should fall flat on its face almost at any point in time, because it could easily veer.
It feels very fragile.
Too violent,
Yeah.
or not violent enough to work, or it could be too surreal or not surreal enough. And there's just some visual touches, like when Betty is sitting in the bed after her husband's dead, and you see just the children's toys over her, right? The lullaby toys. It just gives that perfect sense of a dreamlike state, but without being too absurd or abstract, right? And so it's just wonderful visual touches that take place in it.
You mentioned the cinematography, just really well shot. I mean, you wouldn't expect the scope aspect ratio for a lot of comedies, but that's used very well here, I think. And
particularly the scene where Charlie and Wesley are out in the middle of Texas, and he's talking about the twilight of his career, and it happens to be taking place at twilight. Just little things like that, little visual touches.
And efficient use of the camera too. I mean, I think of the scene at the car dealership right after the scalping, how that's shot. It's really kind of this nice two-shot that pushes in as Chris Rock and Morgan Freeman are talking, and then they get in the car and it kind of pans down, and there's like a lot of reframing that takes place in that one shot. I like efficient camera work like that. It works well here.
Yeah, I mean, it's appropriately flashy. It's not bland filmmaking. It's not bland cinematography. It's not bland editing. It's all very well done, but it's not over the top that it gets in the way of the comedy. That's a difficult thing I think people don't realize with comedic films, is that filmmaking there is extraordinarily delicate, because with drama you can heighten up some of the visuals and it just kind of adds to the drama, but with comedy it can actually take away from the comedy. And so that's why a lot of comedies wind up not being scope ratio. That's why they wind up being a little more flat visually.
Yeah, exactly.
This film isn't flat. It's alive, it's active, and it never is distracting you. It doesn't get in the way of the actual characters or the actual drama or story that you have.
Yeah.
I guess that's the thing. There is a drama here too. I mean, it's a comedy, but it's got heart.
No, yeah, there's some heavy dramatic elements for sure, and you could say that the film is very much about building up, another person into someone that they're not, right?
Now, if you believed her that much, now why is the rest of her story suddenly bullshit?
I just don't buy it.
Don't buy it.
Call it instinct. Call it 35 years of professional know-how.
I call it nutty as my shit after I eat an almond roca.
And that really comes home, that idea there, in her relationship with George.
Yeah.
Which you see developing. It seems to be so kind of tender and interesting. And then when she actually is put on the set and given a part in the show that she doesn't even realize is a show, it's a greatly done scene. I mean, it really does. And even, again, getting to the smartness of the script, the dialogue that's being rehearsed is...
Is this some kind of game that you're playing?
No, it's more like a nightmare I can't wake up from.
There are other people in that nightmare, and they're going to get hurt.
It's just playing out perfectly with what's going on in the actual film.
It comments on the film itself,
yeah. And it winds up being this brutally devastating kind of portrayal of that egocentric actor who
wants to be a director.
Yeah, tries to be more than he really is. Yes, because every actor that wants to be a director is trying to do more than they should, right?
Yes. It happens in TV a lot.
Unless you're Clint Eastwood.
Well, and amazingly enough, Charlie becomes the most, insane character among all of them. It's like Betty is acting like a crazy person, but you understand why that's happening because she's been traumatized by witnessing this murder. Whereas Charlie is in this fantasy land of his own creation.
Right.
And he ultimately...
Imagining he's dancing with Betty at the Grand Canyon.
He's by far the most psychotic character, even though he may seem to be the most reasonable one when the film starts. So that's an interesting turn. Mm-hmm. And it's entirely organic, and it makes sense by the end of the story.
Right, absolutely. And then, of course, this all eventually moves to the point where they do catch up with Betty. They find her in Los Angeles. They've got the information they've been following, and eventually they get there. And it's really Wesley that has been able to piece it together, right, to get them there. And then you have this wonderful scene that takes place in the apartment where they finally meet, and there's this incredible scene where Charlie realizes what's going on.
Life is very strange. I really had you pegged as a cold-blooded bitch. I mean, not that I didn't still admire you for it.
Mm-hmm.
But we also, as an audience, start to realize things. You know, I don't want to spoil it because there's a great reveal on the character relationships that is not spelled out. But then when it is revealed, it adds a wonderful layer to it.
It does, and it's one of those things where you think, oh, why didn't I think of that earlier?
Right.
You know, yeah.
And it also makes it all the more, the final scene becomes so much more poignant when you realize something's there that I had missed the entire time. But it makes perfect sense.
Yep.
It's not a cheap little reveal.
No.
So, but I think, you know, for the sake of anybody who's watching this and wants to see the movie, we can
Probably
avoid
worth,
spoiling that.
Worth preserving that.
Yeah, but he gets to meet with Betty then in that scene, and they have this incredible encounter, which has one of my favorite little lines where he says,
I guess basically I'm conservative, but flexible.
it's just a great little line, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so it's just we get to see how these people impact each other's lives, get closer, and then you as the audience are just along for a great journey.
Yeah.
I've come 2,000 miles for this.
You probably flew.
I see why it didn't maybe succeed in getting its audience back in 2000, which is coming after a lot of the Tarantino-esque movies and imitations. This is not one of those, but it almost looks like it could be one of those. I think audiences just didn't know how to make sense of it.
Yeah. You could kind of misinterpret this movie as maybe trying to be like Tarantino.
Right, or market it that way.
Yeah, yeah, but it's not that way at all. I mean, it's its own thing.
It is. It's just a good, solid movie, and I wish this had been one of those films because it's even got like a cult status. It's just forgotten.
Yeah, it definitely seems to have faded away from the collective consciousness, but yeah, it's definitely worth revisiting or visiting for the first time.
Yes.
Probably for most people.
Yeah. So Nurse Betty, check it out. Great film.
Yeah.
You will not be disappointed.